The job market is frozen. I'm going to talk a lot about that today. If you are looking for a new job or you have a friend or a loved one who's been in the job market, you've probably been hearing the horror stories, and it's pretty bad. So in this episode, I'm going to talk about some strategies you can use to survive this current U.S. job market and maybe look a little farther afield. I'm Larry Cornett, and this is Invincible Career. There are going to be a bunch of links to resources and examples that I share in this podcast episode. They'll be in the newsletter. So if you go to newsletter.invinciblecareer.com, this is Surviving the Current U.S. Job Market, issue 619. And it's all about how to find a new job in these troubling times. And we are certainly facing some troubling times in America. When I said the job market is frozen, that was from a recent headline of an Atlantic article. And I linked that in the newsletter episode so you could check it out. And it reflects the baffling frustration I think many job seekers are feeling right now. I'm definitely seeing this with my clients. I'm seeing it with friends in the tech industry. I'm seeing it all over LinkedIn and social media. It's been going on for the last few years. I think we had a nice boom where the pendulum swung toward the employee side of the equation, and lots of jobs that kind of came out of the COVID lockdown. I'm not sure why that spawned so many jobs. I think there was a boom in remote hiring and the efficiencies of no longer having to maintain a lot of what you have to do in a physical building, in the headquarters offices and so forth. So yeah, there was a ton of hiring and people felt pretty excited about it. It was pretty easy to find a job. There were tons of recruiters and hiring managers reaching out to people. I was seeing it. But then when everything kind of settled down over the next 2 to 3 years, a return to office RTO mandate started coming out. And they started pulling people back into the office. They started cutting down on remote work, and they started reducing hiring and even a few layoffs. There were companies that had boomed like Peloton during the lockdown and then realized they had overgrown and people were going back outside instead of hopping on a bike in their house. And so they had a bunch of layoffs, and there were a bunch of companies that did that reduced their headcount. So the market's been getting tighter and tighter, and this year in 2025, it's pretty bad. There was a quote from that article. It said, 6 months, 576 applications, 29 responses, 4 interviews, and still no job. That's what I think it was the author's brother had been going through. And I've seen similar things. I've seen some people talking about applying like almost 1,000 times and only getting a handful of responses and interviews and still no job. It's pretty bad because already in this year, we are seeing a new flurry of firings and layoffs. They're happening across the corporate world as usual. But now, if you've been paying attention to the news, it's happening in the U.S. federal government. Some of that has been deemed illegal firings and unconstitutional, and there's a whole battle going on with that. But it doesn't change the fact that you get a letter that says your services are no longer required. I've seen those, and people are like, "Okay, I lost my job," and then they're like, "No, we're going to hire you back." And the whipsaw effect is pretty stressful for people. But overall, I think this means that an estimated 200,000 displaced workers are going to enter the job market, and they're going to compete for these scarce jobs. And there were already a ton of people laid off, right? It's not like the people that got laid off last year have already found jobs. I know some people are still looking. So this is a new 200,000 people, because you can go to some of these layoff trackers and you can see how many thousands of people are being laid off by Meta, Google, Amazon, all the tech companies, but also other traditional corporations, not just in tech. And it is pretty scarce. It's a scarce market. And how scarce? Well, and I linked this, the pace of hiring has slowed to levels that were only last seen right after the Great Recession. So that's how scarce. That's how slow the hiring is. It's reaching levels that we saw right after the Great Recession. Also, another indicator, voluntary quitting to find a new job, right? You quit to find a better job, or you're not happy with your workplace. You have a toxic boss. You don't like the way you're being treated, and so you're going to quit, find a new job. Well, that has fallen to its lowest level in a decade. So it's been a long time since people have felt safe quitting a secure job. So people are worried, and they're staying put if they can, which makes a lot of sense. And I tell people this all the time: do not quit a job until you have a job. The easiest time you'll have finding a new job is while you're still employed. That's why you should always be looking for a new job. You should always be looking. You shouldn't wait until it becomes a dire situation. You don't want to wait until you've been laid off. You don't want to wait until you get a surprise firing. You should always be connecting, networking, looking around every week. I'm not saying it should be a full-time effort. You don't need to do a full-time job search while you're trying to hold down a full-time job. That's insane. But you should be looking around. You should be kicking the tires on a few opportunities. And if nothing looks good, nothing's interesting, nobody's making you a great offer, then stay in your current job. No one is going to force you to take a new job. But you should know what's out there and be smart about it, of course. Most employers don't like to hear that you're looking for a new job. They assume you're unhappy, and then they start to question your, quote, loyalty. They don't know if they want to invest in you, like promote you and give you a raise. I've heard these conversations. I worked in the corporate world for about 20 years, so I know. I've heard that. I've heard when they said, I think this person's a flight risk. I don't want to waste a promotion on them. Or why would you give this person a big raise? I've heard they're looking to leave. That happens. So you want to be smart about it. There's no reason to broadcast that you're looking for a job. That's why I really like the networking strategy of finding people you trust, people in your inner circle that you know will keep their mouth shut and will send you opportunities quietly, right? But we're also seeing that employers are concerned about this economy, so they aren't hiring either. So people are staying put in their jobs, employers aren't hiring. The job market is frozen. And of course, this isn't 100% right. You're going to find companies that are hiring here and there, but I'm talking about overall. I'm looking at the statistics across the country. So now we have the recent tariffs that were announced yesterday, right? So tariffs on Canada and Mexico. And in response to that, the stock market tanked. That doesn't help. When the stock market tanks and corporate values drop and shareholders get nervous, companies stop hiring, they stop investing. And then consumer confidence is falling as we are seeing threats of inflation rise. We've been told, get ready, your grocery prices are going to go up. The price of purchasing a new vehicle is going to go up. Everything's going to go up. And that's obvious. I mean, anybody who knows the history of tariffs and has done their homework knows that this expense, the cost of a tariff, is passed on to the consumer. No company is going to absorb that. They won't. They don't have to. They'll just raise prices. So, yeah, inflation's rising. And some people are starting to whisper the recession word. I'd link to some thoughts on that. So, yeah, again, you can go to newsletter.invinciblecareer.com if you want to read more of these links. So, all of this is influencing my outlook for job searchers as a career coach. I am pretty sure the layoffs, firings, it's going to continue in the U.S. this year. We're not done. Things are getting worse. So, of course, companies are going to cut costs. They're going to get rid of their headcount because for most corporations, their biggest expense is headcount. And that means more job seekers will be entering the market to compete with you. So if you are looking for a job, you're actively looking because you're out of work, or you're starting to think maybe I should find a better job or a more secure job, you have a lot more competition now. And unfortunately, fewer jobs will be available in the U.S. because companies here are freezing their hiring. We've all been through it. I can't tell you how many times I was sitting in a meeting and they said, okay, we're freezing hiring for the quarter. All of your recs are frozen, or they would take our recs. And it's like those 5 people that you needed to hire to backfill the people that left, it's gone. Sorry, you're going to have to get everything done with fewer people. Everybody's going to have to work harder, longer hours. Too bad. And that happens, right? And the other fear is even if you do land a job here in the U.S., you may get laid off soon after. I was reading a post from one individual that's out of work right now. And they said they've been laid off twice in the last year. So you get a job and you're happy and you're working for 3 months, 6 months, and all of a sudden you're laid off again. I saw that happen to somebody that they hadn't even finished their 6-month probationary period. And the company already said, whoops, things aren't looking good. We're laying off all the new people. So yeah, that is a risk as well. And all of this turmoil, the political turmoil, the economic turmoil, will continue to damage the U.S. economy and job market. How could it not? I'm not going to be all sunshine and puppies and rainbows here. I'm going to be brutally honest, and I'm going to tell you what you need to hear because I'm trying to help you. I'm not trying to be a cheerleader. Everything's going to be okay. Everything looks wonderful. It doesn't. And I don't want to kid you about that. Unfortunately, if you go to LinkedIn and you're spending any time, you're starting to think, is anybody even worried about all of this? Why are people just posting as if nothing is happening in the country? And that is the behavior of people who feel safe and secure. So they have a good job. They're making good money. They're in the top 5% of wealth in the world. They don't feel so bad. They're sitting on several $1 million in their retirement. Got a lot of investments. And they feel like they can ride out the storm. So they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to upset their employer. So they're not going to say anything and they're not going to do anything. And people are still acting like everything's moving ahead, business as usual, but it's not true. It's going to be harder to find a job. There's going to be fewer jobs to find. So my recommendation, which has shifted in the recent years because of all of this, is that if you need a new job and you can work remotely or mostly remotely with some travel, or you're willing to relocate, I highly encourage you to seek employment with a company that has been founded or is based outside the U.S. So I made this suggestion recently in a Substack note. That's where my newsletter is hosted. And a few people misunderstood it. They really didn't understand what I was trying to say. And so they assumed that employment with a non-U.S. company would always require moving to a new country. And they're like, hey, I don't want to relocate. I can't move to a new country. And yeah, sure, that could be a requirement. Sometimes you get hired and they're like, hey, can you move to our headquarters? Can you move to an office here? That happens, and some people don't mind it at all. A few of my clients and friends have relocated to other countries over the past few years. They've moved to Australia, they've moved to Spain, they've moved to Germany, the Netherlands. Somebody moved to the UK. I can't remember exactly where. So they've relocated, and they were happy to do so. They're doing pretty well. However, I also have clients and colleagues and friends who work for international companies, global companies, but still live in the U.S. So there can be a company that's been founded in another country. That's where their headquarters is, but they have offices around the world. And there are a few examples. You probably know some, or maybe you're not aware that some of these are not U.S. companies. They were not founded in the U.S. And there's some tech ones, some non-tech ones. Atlassian's a big one that's been growing, doing really well. Their global headquarters is in Sydney, Australia. So that's where they are based. But several friends of mine have worked for Atlassian. I think one still works there, maybe two, in their San Francisco office. So they live in the Bay Area, they commute to that office, and they work for Atlassian, which is actually an Australian company. Pretty famous one, IKEA. I'm sure you know IKEA. Founded in Sweden, currently incorporated and headquartered in the Netherlands. And they are always hiring in their U.S. locations. Tons of U.S. locations scattered all over the cities here. I don't know if you've heard of Rakuten, but it's headquartered in Tokyo, Japan. Tons of hiring going on there. There's a lot of jobs in Japan for this company, but they have offices in San Mateo and San Francisco, California. I just drove by there recently. I was like, oh, I didn't realize they had a building here. So there are California people that are U.S. citizens working right there in San Mateo. One of my favorite pieces of software, 1Password, is based in Toronto, Canada. That's where they're headquartered. But they hire for remote positions too. So I saw a bunch of remote positions that said, hey, if you live in the U.S. or Canada, these positions are available to you. And you'll often see this. So one tip, when you're looking for remote jobs, they usually want you to be within a few time zones of where everybody's going to be working. There are companies that hire all over the world. And so that is absolutely true. When I worked at Apple and eBay and Yahoo, we had teams everywhere. So we didn't try to stick in the Pacific time zone. I would get up early for calls with my teams in Germany. And then I would stay up late for calls with teams in China and India. And so, we were all over the place. But sometimes companies that are a little bit smaller want people to be in a few time zones of each other. So the overlap of your working day is pretty high. That's why they do things like that. And a non-tech company, so located in Virginia Beach, Virginia, still incorporated. So the chainsaw makers, they make a lot more than chainsaws. They do a lot of stuff. That's the U.S. affiliate for the Global Steel Group that was founded in Germany. So Steel is all over the place, right? I was just looking. I know a lot about chainsaws because, unfortunately, that's a big part of my life up here with all these trees, is dealing with trees coming down and having to clear my driveway. So I see offices in Austria, Australia, Belgium and Luxembourg, Brazil, Canada, China, the Czech Republic, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, US. I mean, they're all over the place, right? Tons of different kinds of jobs. I mean, a company like this has a big website, e-commerce presence. They do marketing, advertising. They have to design the products. There's manufacturing, customer support. Oh, wow. I didn't scroll far enough. They're also in Italy, Netherlands, Norway, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, Great Britain, on and on and on and on. So yeah, big company, founded in Germany, global offices all over the place. And then I also included in the newsletter a link to, I think it was the top 50 German companies that are doing business in the U.S. Let me go ahead and open it up real quick so I can take a look at it. Yeah, it's unreal. Like DHL Holdings, they have a USA presence, obviously. Looks like that headquarters is in Plantation, Florida. They have over 76,000 employees. Huge, right? Siemens, another one. Volkswagen Group. Bosch, you probably heard of. The Daimler Group, SAP, BASF, Lufthansa, the Bayer Corporation. Oh, okay. BMW Group, obviously, big surprise. Trader Joe's, because they were acquired, right? Yeah, this goes on and on and on. There's a ton of them. And so these are companies that were founded in Germany. They're German corporations, but they have a ton of people that they employ in the U.S. They said that they employ more than 1 million workers in the U.S., all these corporations. So that's unreal. And that's just an example, you know. I have some family in Germany, so it came to mind. But you can pick any country that you may find interesting, or you have ties, you have family, you speak the language, whatever it might be, and do a search. What are the French companies doing business in the U.S.? What are the UK companies doing business in the U.S.? Spain, Italy, Singapore, you name it, New Zealand. You can find it. That's the beauty of the internet. And so it's an interesting way to do a little bit of shopping, to find job opportunities that maybe you've overlooked because you weren't considering a non-U.S. company. So why international? Why am I recommending these companies that are primarily headquartered outside the U.S., even if they have an office in the U.S., right? Well, one is they have diversified global teams, which I think is always a very strong good thing. That means you're going to be working with people from all over the world that aren't necessarily trapped in our local political turmoil. And it's intense. It's intense here. So having that balance and working with people that don't feel that same stress and anxiety and worry can be a balance that makes work a little bit easier and better. A little more balanced in your life, yeah. They have global revenue sources that aren't tied 100% to the U.S. economy. Because the U.S. economy is struggling. The stock market has tanked. People aren't hiring. Consumer confidence has gone down. That's not good. So if you have a U.S. employer that has all their income, revenue being generated in the U.S. and the market is dropping, consumers aren't buying, what's going to happen to that company? Well, they're going to stop hiring. They're going to start laying people off. They're going to cut cost. So it's good. I mean, U.S. is huge, obviously, in the kind of the global corporate environment. Obviously, corporations that are based elsewhere that have a U.S. presence probably generate a ton of revenue from the U.S. I'm not saying they don't, but I'm saying it's not 100%. And so even if we are weakening, they have other sources of revenue that can keep the company floating, right? They can keep moving forward. They can keep growing and hiring if they need to. And they do. They adapt. Already with the tariffs kicking in, Canada is adapting. They're like, okay, we will source fruits and vegetables from other countries. We will bring in liquor from other countries. We're taking U.S. liquor off the shelves. And so it's not easy. It's never fun to adapt like that, but they're being nimble and they're doing it. So that's why I think it's smart to work for a company that isn't tied 100% to the U.S. economy. That's risky. It just is. That's why I don't tie myself to only working with U.S. clients as a career and leadership coach. I have a lot of clients in the U.S. I have a bunch in California because that's my network, obviously. But I also know people from all over the world because I worked all over the world. I spent quite a bit of time in China. I lived in Shanghai for 3-4 months, something like that, working there. Spent a ton of time in Europe. I've traveled to Australia, gave a talk in Australia, met people there. So I have connections all over the world, and I have clients all over the world. People who've hired me that live in other countries. And so I'm not 100% dependent on U.S. income, which is good. That gives me a lot more stability. The other thing is when it's an international company, it's not under the complete control of the U.S. federal government. I wish that this wasn't something I was concerned about. And I'll tell you, 2-3 months ago, I wasn't. But I am now. Unfortunately. And it's not good. We've been watching what happens when American companies bend the knee to this administration. They change policies. They eliminate DEI. And if you don't understand DEI, if you fully don't get what it is and you think it's affirmative action, then you just don't understand. And I'm sorry. But if you are somebody who isn't a wealthy white male, then you understand that DEI has created policies that make it better for you to work in the workplace without harassment and discrimination. If you've ever used wheelchair access ramps, then you know these are good things. Why should someone not be able to have a job if they are in a wheelchair? I'm not going to get into all that. That's not what this episode's about. But when you see American companies doing this and you see them doing whatever the federal government asks them to do, that's a little concerning. And so it may give you more flexibility and more freedom and peace of mind to work for a company that doesn't feel like they are owned by the U.S. federal government. And then finally, which is really cool, I've been noticing this for many years, international companies are seeking and appreciating U.S. talent. For now, it's a good thing. I mean, it's kind of cool. And I linked an article that talked about this, but the number of American workers hired by international companies grew 62% in 2023. And I was noticing this, definitely in tech and other industries. And we have some amazing researchers and scientists and all kinds of talented people here. International companies are interested in that talent. And so they seek American tech workers and American leaders and researchers, professors, you name it. My hope is these companies will be more willing to hire new employees than U.S. companies seem to be right now. So the market is freezing in the U.S. These international companies are willing to open their doors and hire people. And the thing that also happens when you work for an international company is it can open opportunities up to you that could be interesting for you later. And as an example, one of my friends worked for an international company. It was based in one of their U.S. locations, and they worked there for many years. And then they said, you know what? I'd be interested in relocating. I would love to relocate to one of your offices that's based in another country. And it took a little bit of work and a little bit of time, but they did. They got transferred there and started working in that office in a completely new country. And now they live there permanently. They got their citizenship and they're super happy. They're super happy. And it's an interesting thing. You know, I was born and raised in America, and so we're proud of our country. We love what's available to us here, and it is an amazing country with a lot of great stuff going for it. But we get a little focused and a little bit in our American bubble and think this is the only place to live. This is the only place that's good where you could be happy. And that's not true. There are certainly countries that are much worse places to live than America. Absolutely. We're all well aware of it. Good example, Russia. I would not want to live in Russia, but hey, that's me. But there are countries that have a pretty amazing quality of life They have a high literacy rate. They have low crime rates. They treat people well. The human rights are important there. If you look at the Scandinavian countries as an example, there's a lot of good stuff going on there, a lot of happy people. So there are countries where you could work and live and be happy. Another friend of mine relocated to Spain, lives in Spain now with their family. Super happy. Super happy. This person's not anti-American by any means, but they wanted to have an interesting experience for them and their children, and so they are. Who knows if they'll stay there permanently? I don't know. But right now, they're pretty happy. They're having a really good time there. So in the newsletter, I included some resources to help you check out some jobs with international companies. One was the 15 best international companies hiring U.S. remote workers. And it's probably some companies you've never heard of. There are some that I was like, who is this? Never heard of this. Coda Payments was one that came up. I've heard the NTT Data, another one that came up. Appen, I've heard of Appen. Atlassian, as I mentioned. Crafty Base, InkSub, it's a WordPress development company. Bamerd Institute in Denmark. Dentsu, 11. Icon PLC, Nearform. What else we got going on here? Lululemon. You heard of that? Anyway, bunch of companies there. There's another one that is about 30 international companies that are hiring. So you can go check that out. Companies like Bolt, Byborg Enterprises, Creative Fabrica, Eurowings Digital. You're probably not even familiar with a lot of these. I know I wasn't. Here's one. It's in Zurich. Grape. That's cool. Fully digital employee insurance combined with healthcare services. A lot of companies out there. We get rather tied up in our American world and think that that's all that's available. I also linked a few resources where you can go search for international jobs, but also remote jobs, which is super helpful. So there's internationaljobs.com, remotejob.io, We Work Remotely. You probably heard of that. Very useful. WeWorkRemotely.com. And you can filter and sort and find stuff that is 100% remote. You can find stuff in specific countries. You could look for U.S. companies if you feel more comfortable with that, or you could look for international companies. And I would be remiss if I didn't say, yeah, your income taxes do get a little more complicated when you have income from non-U.S. sources. So let me be clear, because I just read about a guy that's going to spend 4 years in prison for this. When you receive income from a company outside the U.S. or you work outside the U.S., you still need to report your income. You can't say, oh, I'm not working in the U.S., so I don't have to report this as my U.S. income. Yeah, you do. There are some benefits you could get for, I think it's a foreign earned tax credit or something like that. But I link some of that. There's a great overview of U.S. taxes on foreign income for individuals. I also recommend talking with your accountant. You got to make sure you are appropriately handling the reporting of your income and tax payments. Hopefully, if you're working for an established international company that is set up to hire in the U.S., so for example, they do have an incorporated presence here, they're going to take care of it all. They're going to handle the reporting for you. You'll probably even get a W-2. Some cases you may not, so you'll have to figure out how to track your income, report your income, make sure you're reporting how much you're paying in local taxes to that country, but then figure out what you still owe the U.S. Always wise to verify. Make sure you're doing the right thing. That's why I say talk to an accountant. It can get a little complex. And yeah, that additional complexity is not fun. I hear some of you shutting down right now and saying, ugh, this sounds terrible. I don't like complexity either. It's not fun for me. But I'll tell you what's even worse. Being out of work for a really long time. And I have some people that I know that have been out of work for over a year. I don't know what your nest egg's like or what your cushion's like, but can you go without income for a year? Would you still be able to afford your mortgage, pay your rent, buy groceries, pay your bills? Might be hard. Might be impossible. So, not fun to, kind of embrace that additional complexity of working for a global company that's not based in the U.S., but kind of nice to get a paycheck again. So, if you are struggling to land a new job with a U.S. company in this crazy job market, I'm simply encouraging you to consider opportunities beyond our borders. That's all. All right. As always, drop in and leave a comment, ask a question. And if you go to newsletter.invinciblecareer.com, if you've had a good experience with this. Oh, the other thing that I linked in the newsletter is you can grab a free chapter from the book that I've been writing for the last few years. I've written the first draft. I'm halfway through editing the book. I got a little more work to do, and then I want to probably hire somebody to do another editorial pass. I got to get a cover design, all that great stuff. The book is Becoming Invincible in Life, a guide to reclaiming your power, freedom, and future. So you can click the big button I have, read a free chapter, and you can get access to a free chapter from the book and see what you think of it. Best of luck with this job market. I know it's a little crazy, but we'll get through this. Until next time, I wish you the best of luck in becoming an opportunity magnet for the best things in life.